Hey folks, this is Cindy. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today's video is a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about Copic Coloring Classes and what you can learn in those types of classes and how you can apply them to different projects. Now, everybody has to learn, and I truly, truly believe that everybody can learn. I get comments all the time, folks saying that they could never color the way I do, and nobody can color the way I do because I'm Cindy and I'm going to color my way. But I do believe everybody can learn, and I truly believe that everybody can take those concepts that they have learned and apply them to different things. And sometimes it's even out of the box, but it's totally doable. And I really want to focus on that today because I think it's super important and it really helps people understand that this is fun, it shouldn't be taken seriously, and it's totally doable by anybody. I know that this video is going to be a little bit longer, folks, but I really wanted to talk about this and really get down to it and share this project with you. All right, so this is the Simon Says stamp, Even More Spring Flowers. There's a series of these. I will have these linked down below as well as over on my blog. I love these. And there's actually a specific reason why I chose this particular stamp set, but I'll talk about that here more in a minute. This is the Simon Says stamp nested circle dies. I use this quite a bit. Actually, this is one of my favorite circle die sets. I cut these out of acetate and I keep those in the back of the pocket here so I can use them again and again on my cards. I do a lot of faux frames. I do a lot of ink blending, and these make for excellent stencils. So I want you to take a look at the picture there on the left and my card there on the right. This is from a Vanilla Arts marker painting class. This was called Cheers. This was about coloring in glass. And I was really intrigued by this particular class because I struggle a little bit with coloring in glass, and I wanted to try a different approach to it. Now, typically I do like most folks, I just color in blue and I call it a day, but I loved the idea of this class. Now, this probably looks pretty good to most folks. However, I did struggle with this a little bit. This was my fourth attempt that you see here on the screen. By the time I got to this, I was feeling pretty good. I knew that there was things that I could still work on, and that's fine. That's exactly the point. You don't have to be perfect right out of the gate. This is all about learning. Even I have to learn, and I'm totally comfortable with that, and I keep that in mind every time I start a class. I knew that I would be able to take things from that class and translate it to my project today, and that's what I'm going to be working on. First thing though, I need to make some masks for my stamps. Now, I had somebody comment about a week ago about making masks like this. I couldn't find the comment to respond, so I thought I'd take the opportunity today to show you again how I do this. These are full stick Post-it notes. I stamp the images right there on top. I pull off as many layers as I need. In this case, I'm using 3, and then I cut them out all at once. So I have all of my masks done at once. It's super duper easy, really handy. In most cases, I'll cut out extras just in case. I'll store them in the back of my stamp pocket, which is actually what I end up doing with this. And take a look at this. Super handy. Now, I didn't come up with this, but man, this is brilliant. I am going to be using the Ink on 3 fade out ink today because I wanted to do some no line coloring. It kind of pays homage to the marker class. Amy Schulke, the lady that runs the marker painting classes for Vanilla Arts, she does a lot of no line coloring, and it's awesome. It's definitely a technique worth learning, and I love that because it really gives you the idea of really keeps you focused on your coloring as opposed to paying attention to black lines. It's really groovy, so I definitely wanted to make sure I did that here today. So now I'm using one of my stencils here that I had die cut with one of the nested circle dies, and I'm just lightly tracing that with a pencil. I am using Copic Express blending card for my project today. I'm showing you right now 4¼ inches by 5½ inches. I end up switching this up to 5½ inches by 5½ inches, and then I trim that down. We'll talk about that when we get there. I just decided that I didn't really like the layout of it. at the 4¼ by 5½. So I switched it up. No big deal. I am using my Misty stamping tool because it's easier. You could definitely hand stamp this if you'd like. I had my first image on there and then I bring in my second image. Now, one of the things that I am keeping in mind when I start stamping my card panel here is I already know that my coloring is going to be a little bit more involved. So I'm trying to keep that in mind as I create my layout here on my card panel. There's no need to add a whole bunch of extra work. Now, it looks like there was a lot of images going on, but I am also purposely choosing some of the same images so I can mix it up a little bit and make them look like they're a little bit different from each other. However, the principle's still the same and it makes it go that much faster. The reason why I chose the Simon Says stamp Even More Spring Flowers is because of the shape. These shapes would lend really well to this particular technique. Those flowers are nice and big. They're open. They can handle that brightness of that yellow. Plus, the centers of them, I can actually color the centers of those. I did color the centers of those to kind of reflect what the bubbles were doing inside that champagne. I was totally in love with the colors for those champagne glasses. I thought that they were beautiful, and these flowers really translated well for that. Also, I liked the leaves for the stamp set because they had their own movement. They had folds, they had waves, and I could play up the feel of glass. Now, I did not do a direct translation of the glass itself. So I didn't necessarily say, okay, well, these have folds. I'm looking through several layers of glass. How would I color that in? But I did keep that in mind while I colored it. And that was kind of the point. I learned all I needed to know from the class. I'm just not ready to apply all of it yet. Hopefully that makes sense. This is what I take away from any class I take. It doesn't matter who I take it from. So in other words, all of the information that was provided in the class is in my head. And I tried it all, obviously, because I completed the class, but it doesn't mean that I'm quite proficient at it yet, and that's okay. So I'm going to hang on to what I know I can do, what I did well in that class, and I'm going to keep working on that. I'm going to practice on that until I know for 100% certain I have that down. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to take the other information that I know that I need to work on, the other techniques that I know that I need to work on, and I'll start working on those. That doesn't mean that I've forgotten any of it. It doesn't mean that I don't keep any of that in mind while I'm currently working on whatever project I work on next. It just means that I know that I'm not ready to apply it just yet. I'm not proficient in it. That's okay. It doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means that I'm not ready to do it. And I really want folks to keep that in mind. Anybody can accomplish any of these things. For some, it's going to take a little bit longer. Some are going to breeze through it, but anybody can learn it, and it's okay to give yourself permission to learn it. Okay, so I'm working on my first flower here, and I mapped that out with the Y21. Now I'm bringing in the Y11, and I'm blending that out quite a bit. I'm extending that past that Y21 pretty well. I'm still leaving myself plenty of white space because I do want to especially make sure that I leave myself some highlight on this. I guess you could say in my mind, I'm thinking it's that stark highlight that you would see on glass, the reflection on glass, I suppose. So that's kind of what I'm keeping in mind here. The nice thing about the Copic Express It blending card is it is meant to blend really well with Copics. It's specifically designed that way, so that does help a bunch. Now, you could definitely use this on any of your favorite Copic friendly paper. I also use Nina Solar White cardstock. That works well too. Lately, I've been using up quite a bit of my Copic blending card here because I have a bunch of it, and I haven't wanted to take the time to cut any more of my Nina. So after I had the Y11 on there, I blended the rest of that out with the Y00. Now, this is just a base coat here. Amy Schulke is right up my alley. I think that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to her classes initially, is because I've really, really been into Copic coloring with colored pencils lately. And that's what she does. That's the one thing that she has to offer. And I think it's amazing. I think it's a really strong idea that you get those colors down with your Copics and then you're finishing those finer details off with the colored pencils. I think that makes a huge difference. Plus, the color combinations are amazing. So for this particular class, I used the Y21, a Y11, Y00 to get that base coat down for the champagne. In this case, it was the flowers. And then I bring in some surprising colors. Amy brings in some surprising colors to get those deeper, darker shadows. And I just think it's awesome. All right, so I'm going to show you this flower as well, because the other thing I would like for you to keep in mind when you're coloring anything in, especially whether it's a class or not, I suppose it doesn't matter. Stick with it. It can be a struggle, and you might get started and you might think I haven't a clues to what I'm doing, but stick it out. It does pull together. Don't give up on it. So this flower is a really good example of that. There's a lot going on this flower. There's lots and lots of petals, obviously more petals than there were on the other two flowers, and it can seem overwhelming. So I suggest that you slow down, and you'll hear this a lot in most classes. Slow down. Take it one petal at a time. That's all I'm doing while I map this out. So I'm taking a look at the petal that's drawn to my eye first. I color that in. I let my eyes roam over the image. I go on to the next petal that I see, and I keep coloring that in until it's done. And before you know it, it starts to take shape and it looks really awesome. So again, I'm blending out with this Y11 here. Now this one is a little bit trickier because some of those petals are packed in there pretty tight and they're pretty short. That's okay. I can still give myself plenty of white space here. Plus, when I start bringing in that colored pencil, I can add in some more of those shadows, and it's going to directly offset that highlight anyways. Okay, so I'm going to have some links down below as well as over on my blog for my top 3 coloring classes. And I believe that all 3 of these ladies have something different to offer in terms of technique and approach and teaching style. And I think in their own way, they're all worth it. And I don't necessarily think that one size fits all for a class. I think that it's definitely a good idea to try out different ones and find the one that works best for you. That being said, I would at least once give them all a try because, as I said, they all have something to offer. So I frequently follow Sandy Allnock. I've taken a couple of her classes. I love the way that she teaches. I love her style, and I love that she's kind of all over. She does Copic coloring, she does watercoloring, she does colored pencils, and I think that's wonderful. She's super smart. She has lots and lots to teach. I also like Kitten Clowder. She's primarily colored pencils and Copic coloring. I like her teaching style. It's very slowed down. It's a very relaxed, and I love that. I love the way that she can break down a class. I think that's probably one of the best approaches ever in teaching. And then, of course, there's Amy for Vanilla Arts, her marker painting classes. I like her approach because not only does she combine the two of Copics and colored pencils, she's really smart about detail. She's wonderful about teaching how you can make those details come to life and really finish off your project that way. So again, definitely check all 3 of them out, but don't feel like you have to take every class that comes your way. Find one that works for you, stick with it, because if you're learning from it, that's great. That you're under no obligation to go to anybody else if you found somebody that can teach to you, because at least you're still learning. At least you're still going to color and you can still create your projects. So I gave you a little bit of a close-up on those flowers. They look totally different now that they're colored in. They still look really washed out, pretty pale. That's fine. We're going to get to more of that here in a minute. But I am going to color in these leaves. I started with the BV23. I mapped out those shadows, and now I'm blending that out with my C0. Now, when I bring in the C0, it's pretty heavy. Like I'm literally putting pressure on the tip of my marker to get that to blend out. I want that BV to blend out really well. But I'm still leaving lots and lots of legitimate white in the center of these. Now at this point, it looks kind of cool. Like you can kind of still see it's starting to give you the idea that these would be clear like glass, but we're not done yet. I only showed you the one because they were all the same. And again, I wasn't thinking, okay, I have 2 layers of glass here, so how much shadow should I put here? I was going for the feel of glass, not the look of glass. Hopefully that makes sense. Now that I have all of those colored out, I'm going to kind of touch up underneath these little buds here with the BV23. I'm just lightly adding those. They kind of got lost a little bit in some of that coloring. And also at this point, I'm not at all worried about what the centers of these flowers look like. That's not important. We'll get to that as soon as we start finishing this up. So I'm going in with a super duper light hand on these stems because I am going to finish these off with colored pencils and make them look a little bit more solid when I'm ready to get to that point. But at the moment, I'm just going in very light-handed. Now, some of this while I was talking, hopefully you noticed, some of this I was going so slow. Even for me, I color all the time, and even I was taking my time. Because I think that's the other part of this. I think that's another area where folks get intimidated is they feel like they have to just get through it. They should just be able to put that marker down on that paper and they should just be good to go. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you need to slow down, take your time, and be super light-handed. It's not a race. You can still get that card done. But if you rush through it, you're more likely to ruin it. So hopefully you could see on some of those areas where I was taking my time. And frequently, what most people probably don't notice if you watch my videos is I do pause. I will stop and I'll take a look at what I'm doing. And I'll reassess of what I'm doing at that moment and make sure that I'm committed to that's exactly what I want. That's okay. It's okay to guess yourself. It's okay to question if this is what you really want. And then when you decide that is what you want, then take it slow. It's totally fine. Okay, now that I have all of my Copic coloring done, I'm going to start bringing in my colored pencils. And the first one I'm going to start with is Blue Violet Lake. This was one of the options for the pencils and the coloring class. So I'm going to start with this one first. I like this a little bit better than the Parma Violet that was recommended, but you do whatever works best for you. I'm going to start this flower out in real time because I want you to see how slow I'm going. And you might get a good indication how light of a hand I'm using. I am barely putting any pressure down on this paper because I don't need to. I'm going to slowly build this color up. Now, this does make things take a little bit longer, but I swear it is totally worth it in the end. Again, you don't have to get instant gratification. A lot of times, the slower you go, the more you put into it, the better results you get out of it. And I'm definitely doing that with these flowers. I'm doing that with this whole entire card. So I'm taking it very slow. I am bringing some of this Blue Violet Lake up into where it has some of those dips and folds in that flower because I do want to reinforce that there are some of these lines. Now, that was another reason why I chose this particular stamp set, because if you look at it, it has like these stitches in it. Well, I don't want the stitches, but the placement on them are perfect. They were illustrated to look like they would be a part of the flower. That's where the flower would fold. So that's where I'm going to put my shadows. This Blue Violet Lake is one of my shadow colors on this. This would have been used as a shadow color on that champagne glass. So that is why I'm bringing it into these flowers, because by the time I'm done, these are going to actually look like they're more of a golden champagne color. It won't look blue at all. So again, I'm just going in those little shadows with a super light hand. I'm going in very, very tight circles to make sure that I get even coverage. It doesn't need to be dark. I just need to make sure that I get some even coverage. Now I'm going to speed this up because again, it did take a while, and I'm kind of eyeballing it as I go, trying to decide where I want to get those shadows. Now, some of them are in obvious places, and that's fine, but some of them are not so obvious. So if I could take some creative license while I'm coloring these, I definitely did, but I stopped and I paid attention to what my shape looked like before I committed to it. That is a really good trick to make sure that you're not putting things where you don't want to put them, and then you don't ruin your project or don't feel like you've made any mistakes. The other thing that I'm keeping in mind is I'm really just focusing on the technique. Now, yes, I do want this to look nice when I'm done with it, but overall, the point of the exercise, the point of making this was getting down those techniques and making sure that I had them right. And that's fine. Don't feel like it has to be a masterpiece when it's done, because it totally doesn't. The idea is to be able to learn these techniques so you do become more proficient at them, so your projects do look really good when they're done. So yes, I want this to look nice. On the other hand, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. I'm learning those techniques, reinforcing those techniques that I'd learned from the class. Once I have my initial layer of colored pencil down on the blue violet lake, then I can go back in and I can add a little bit to deeper, darker shadows by adding just a little bit more pressure. Now, I'm still not going very heavy. This one is the mineral orange, I believe. Yes, this is mineral orange. I'll have these linked down below as well as over on my blog if you're interested in these colors. And I'm still doing the same thing that I did with that blue violet lake. Now, yes, I already have it all mapped out with my blue violet lake, and I could go a little bit heavier, but I'm not going to. I'm still going to keep a pretty light hand and build this up as I go. And I really feel that this is important. I am stretching this out a little bit past that blue violet lake, and it's really cool. It's probably hard to see here on the screen, but it's really cool up close because you can see the difference over the top of that blue violet lake. It doesn't look blue anymore. It looks a more desaturated orange. And then when you bring it up past that blue violet lake, you can definitely tell a difference, and it has that variation in color. It's very cool. That was one of the things that I liked about the Cheers workshop, was the color of that champagne. I thought it was just gorgeous, and I thought it would look really beautiful on flowers. Now, in that workshop, that champagne has a little bit of transparent feel to it, and that's the point, because it's supposed to be a liquid. Champagne is a transparent liquid. I'm not necessarily going for that transparency. I'm going for more for the tone of that color, or the depth of the color, the shade of the color. That's what I'm thinking. I'm going for that particular shade. I think at some point it would be really cool to actually play up the idea that these are a transparent flower. I think that would be awesome. I wasn't ready to take it there quite yet, but I think it would definitely be something to look to do in the future, because I think it would turn out really cool. I am also there's some places where I had not initially put any shadow. Now that I'm coming in with that mineral orange, I'm adding shadow in other areas, because I don't want it to be quite as dark as it would be with that blue violet lake, but I still need some shadow and some depth there. So I'm just going straight in with that mineral orange. Super duper light hand. Now at the base of that flower, I'm kind of working in those tight circles as I go up in the center of the flower. I'm just drawing really light pencil lines. And then I'm also adding this mineral orange at the tips of these flowers. Now there's some folds in there, and I want to play those up. So I'm adding that shadow in there. I'm going to be bringing in yellow ochre here in just a moment. And then I'm going to go over the top of everything I had done with the blue violet lake as well as the mineral orange, and I'm going to blend that out. I'm only going to show you how I color in this one flower. I have the same approach on all of the flowers. I was really trying to think of ways I could get this video down into more manageable portions. And I kind of figured that if you saw me do this one, you would get enough of the idea that you could definitely do the others. Now, that being said, I don't want anybody to think that this project replaces that class. It does not at all. All I'm trying to get at with this is how you can take something you learn from one thing and translate it to another project. So you build up your arsenal of techniques and approaches and make some really pretty things. So definitely check out that class. But again, that being said, wanted to show you this one, so hopefully you could get the idea on how to do the other ones. And then I wasn't going to make you sit here forever and ever with me today. So I'm finishing up with this yellow ochre here. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to go back to my pencils and I'm going to start deepening this and darkening this with a heavier hand. I at no point go in with too heavy a hand. I don't need to have super thick layers of colored pencil on this. It's definitely not necessary, but I'm definitely applying enough pressure that you get more of that true tone of whatever color of colored pencil you're using. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm also kind of bringing out a little bit more of those shadows, but they would technically be a lighter shadow of this yellow ochre. So I really want to play up the different layers of color here, the different shades that we have going on. I think that's a really beautiful effect, and it kind of takes you out of the box of the traditional 4 combinations of Copic colors or 3. This really helps you bring in a bunch of different colors into your project, and you could definitely see those variations when it's done, and it looks super cool. I'm also not going to show you how I color in the centers of these flowers for 2 reasons. Number 1, again, I was trying to keep the time down on this video. Number 2, I struggled with these a little bit. I had several ideas going on in my head, but I didn't quite know how I wanted to accomplish it. So this even happens to me, folks. I don't know everything there is to know in card making or coloring for that matter. So my idea was to go into those darker shadow areas with more of a deeper orange tri-plus pen. It's more of a orange brown. So I did that. And then the white spaces, I went in with a little bit lighter yellow. I hated it. I didn't like it at all. So then my next plan was to bring in a white gel pen and really bring out what would be highlights in it. I didn't like that either. What I ended up actually doing was going over everything with a Stardust, Secura Stardust gel pen. I filled in the centers of the stamen inside these flowers. And then I went over it with a Secura clear glaze pen and I called it good. Now, at the end of the day, it ended up working out, but I kind of had to struggle a little bit. I didn't think there was any reason for you to watch all of that, so I cut that out. I would suggest you just kind of do your own thing. If you could also even just take these colored pencils, you could do the mineral orange, and this is probably what I should have done to begin with. Take that mineral orange, go into those darker shadow areas, and then blend that out with that yellow ochre and just leave it. You could still put maybe the glaze pen over the top of that, the clear glaze pen over the top of that, and call it good. Probably what I should have done. I didn't. I rode the struggle bus. It's all good. It works out in the end, and they look awesome. So at this point, I'm bringing in all of my pencils here. I'm darkening those shadows up where I feel that they need to be darker, blending things out where I feel that I can blend them out a little bit better. And then I'm going to move on to the next flower. And I do this for each of the flowers, but I don't do them all at once. I cannot stress enough how important it is to just slow down and take things one step at a time, one thing at a time. Finish something, then move on to something else. Now you probably saw right there, I did bring in a cool gray 70%. We're going to talk about that here more in just a moment. I actually didn't mean to do that on this flower, but it's fine. You can't even tell. I caught myself before it was too late. It was fine. Even if I had probably added that more to this flower, it would be okay. That's another thing I can't stress enough. I want you guys to forgive yourself when you make mistakes. It's not a big deal. It's just a card. You can always start over. You're always going to learn something, so it's totally fine. All right, there is a close-up of that flower, and you can definitely tell the difference between the ones that are just simply Copic, colored with Copics, and the one that I just finished up with those colored pencils. Look at how much more definition that flower has. And now all of them are done. They have more definition yet. Now, our leaves are looking a little pale compared to these. I think these leaves would actually look really cool on a dark cardstock. I think that would actually be really groovy. But I want to make sure that I darken these up a little bit. And at this point, I'm taking my cue from what the glass looks like on the base of those flutes. So I start with the cool gray 70%, and I'm just going in where I would have added that BV23. I'm not stretching it out past that. By nature, this cool gray 70% is a dark pencil. It's pretty dark. So I don't want to make these leaves look too dark, so I'm sticking strictly where I had that BV23. Again, this is a really light hand. Now I've sped all of this up at this point because you saw before how slow and light I was working. I'm doing the same thing now, just different colors. This is again the blue violet lake. Now I'm stretching this out past where the BV23 was, where I've blended it out with that C0, but not completely with the C0. I'm letting some of that peek through, and I'm saving almost all of that highlight, with the exception of where I want these leaves to move away from me. So I'm bringing in some grayed lavender to do that with. And I'll go over a little bit of where the blue violet lake is and then stretch that out just a little bit more. So I'm adding a little bit more depth to that, even though it's not a very dark color. And then I'm going to call that good. Now I'm going to play up the idea of that champagne reflecting off the champagne glass. So if you look at the picture from the Cheers workshop, you can see where that champagne, the color of that champagne within the glass is going to reflect on the glass. So that's what I'm doing with these leaves. I'm using a really light hand and slowly, very slowly building that color up. I don't want it to be super duper stark. So I'm trying to be really careful there. Now, one of the things that she teaches in this class is, so if you have 2 layers of glass, how would you add the shadow to that? How would you make that look? That was one of the things that I kind of struggled with a little bit. I'm not super proficient with it yet. I can't quite see it in my head. So while I wanted to make these leaves look glass-like, I wasn't necessarily going for legitimate glass. So they definitely have the feel of it, but I would not look at these and go, yes, so those are glass leaves, and that's totally fine. I'll get there eventually. I'll just keep working at it. Now I'm going to add my usual drop shadow, but instead of using my usual colors, I'm actually going to stick with the colors from the class. And this is the BV20. And then I'm going to blend that out with the C0 and then a colorless blender. I actually think I've been calling this a BV23. Just kidding, folks. It is a BV20. So I'm adding those in to those nooks and crannies. I'm not at all paying attention to the light source. I totally don't even care. There's enough going on here that you're not even going to notice it anyways. So I'm just adding those in where I feel the deepest, darkest shadows would be, where I feel that these flowers would cast some shadow, and I'm just adding it to those areas, blending that out with the C0, then going in with my colorless blender and blending that out a little bit more. It's pretty soft. I think at the end of the day, you really get the idea that there's a cast shadow there, but it's not super heavy. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was going for. I cut that down to 4 3/4 inches by 4 3/4 inches, stamped a sentiment from the Simon Says Stamp Friendship Bloom stamp set in Simon Says Stamp Slate ink, mounted it on a top folding note card that was cut to 5 inches by 5 inches. That is my favorite things, Blue Yonder cardstock. I picked that because I really felt that it matched that Blue Violet Lake perfectly. I added some finishing touches to it. I will actually have those details over on my blog so we can save some more time here, because I'm sure by this point y'all are ready to check out. That is it, folks. We are done. We are good to go. Again, I definitely suggest everybody, go check out some Copic coloring classes. Stick with it. Be patient. You can learn a bunch from them. I will have my 3 websites that I recommend linked down below, as well as over on my blog. So do be sure to check those out. I'm actually looking forward to being able to do this project again, those champagne classes. And kind of work out some of those things that I feel I could work on a little bit more, because it was a blast. It was a total blast to learn new things. Leave me a comment below if you know of anybody that I hadn't mentioned here today. I'm always interested in finding new things to learn, and I'm sure lots of folks are as well. I hope you enjoyed my card today. If you did, hit that like button and share it with your friends. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and tap that bell next to the subscribe button so you can receive all future notifications. Thanks again so much for stopping by. Until next time.